words of Sri Aurobindo from the Collective Works of Sri Aurobindo, Volume 32, page 217, topic The Mother's Force. Question: what should I do so that my work becomes an offering? What should I do so that I can always be with the Mother? For the Sri Aurobindo says, what you should do is to have confidence and try to remain always confident and cheerful. If you feel depressed, call for the Mother's force to remove the depression. If you fall ill, call the Mother's force to cure you. When you work, call the Mother's force to support you and do the work through you. Next subtopic: receptivity and openness to the Mother's force. Sri Aurobindo says, do not allow yourself to be troubled or discouraged by any difficulties, but quietly and simply open yourself for the Mother's force to flow in and allow it to change you. Date 10th March 1931. Sri Aurobindo says, when you decided to tell the Mother, it had the effect of opening something in your physical consciousness and the Mother's force acted. It often happens so. The action of the Mother's force depends on a certain power of receptivity in the mind or vital or body, and openness is the first necessary condition for the receptivity. Date 29th May 1933. Question: how to become one with the Divine? For the Sri Aurobindo says, open yourself to the Mother's force and aspire. In time, you will become one with the Divine. Let me repeat this. Open yourself to the Mother's force and aspire. In time, you will become one with the Divine. Date 15th June 1933. Sri Aurobindo says the vital defects and difficulties are the same in all, and also the shortcomings of the mind. One has to open in faith and confidence to the Divine. The Mother's force will gradually put everything right. Date 15 September 1933. Question: I am overcome with disappointment and depression. After reading your letter, everything crumbled down in a wave. You said you would increase the Mother's light and consciousness in me, but I can't receive them correctly when I feel like this. I used to believe that the Mother was always there to help me, but now you have uprooted that blind faith of mine. Why did you write like that? A little encouragement from your side would make me stronger to reach the destination. For the Sri Aurobindo says, I wrote so because the action of the sadhana does not depend on the Mother alone, but also on the attitude, will, and openness of the sadhak. Let me repeat. The action of the sadhana does not depend on the Mother alone, but also on one's attitude, will, and openness of the sadhak. That is a well-known fact of the spiritual life which everybody is supposed to know. The Mother's force can do everything only when there is a real and true and complete surrender and openness to the Mother. All these things have been written again and again, and it ought not to be necessary to repeat it to each one if it were a new and unheard of idea. Date 12th Jan 1934. Question: I had a terrible headache today. What is this all about? If it is yogic in origin, I will have some comfort. Is the Mother breaking some resistances inside? For the Sri Aurobindo says, no. To make people ill in order to improve or perfect them is not Mother's method. But sometimes things like headache come because the brain either tries too much or does not want to receive or makes difficulties. But these yogic headaches are of a special kind, and after the brain has found out the way to receive or respond, they do not come at all. 20th June 1935. Sri Aurobindo says if one remains in full confidence in the mother and psychically open, then the mother's force will do all, and one has only to give consent and keep oneself open and aspire. 12th November 1935. Sri Aurobindo says it is no use giving way to depression or self-distrust. There are many obstacles. They are the only obstacles to change you want and which the mother is working in you. The suggestions which raise these things are always one-sided and exaggerated, and one ought not to listen to them. It is not by his own strength or good qualities that anyone can attain to the divine change. There are only two things that matter: the mother's force at work and the sadhak's will to open to it and trust in her working. Keep your will and your trust and your care, nothing for the rest. Keep your will and your trust and care nothing for the rest. They are only difficulties that all meet in their sadhana. 13 May 1936. Question. I feel the descent of the mother's peace and power and the action of her force down to the physical. Why then does this trouble still persist? Is the nervous part of my being not receiving the force, or is it receiving it but refusing to change? For this Sri Aurobindo says, the peace and force come down, but the nervous weakness also rises up and resists and counteracts the influence and prevents them from settling in the being. That is because your mind assents to the nervous weakness, accepts its suggestions as true, is full of apprehensions and doubts, believes even that it is the force which creates the nervous trouble. If you fear the action of the force, how can the force do its work? 5th September 1936. Sri Aurobindo says, it is certain that one's own effort is necessary, though one cannot do the sadhana by one's own effort alone. The mother's force is needed, but the sadhak must open himself to it, reject what opposes the force, put his full sincerity, aspiration and willpower into the sadhana. It is only when all is open and there is the full surrender that the divine power takes up the sadhana so entirely that the personal effort is no longer necessary. But that cannot happen at an early stage. One must go on opening oneself, concentrating, consecrating oneself, making the surrender. It is only when all is open and there is full surrender that the divine power takes up the sadhana so entirely that personal effort is no longer necessary. But that cannot happen at an early age. One must go on opening oneself, consecrating oneself, making the surrender till that later stage comes. This has been explained in the book The Mother. Date 17th March 1937. Sri Aurobindo says, open what is closed. The mother does not withhold her force from anyone. It is therefore all in abundance. Her pleasure is in giving her force, not to withhold it. But if you keep your mind filled with thoughts of this kind about X or Y or Z and others, and your needs and your grievances, you shut yourself up in that, and there is no room for the higher consciousness and its force to come in. Golden words. Let me repeat this again for you all. Open what is closed. The mother, the divine mother, does not withhold her force from anyone. It is there for all in abundance. Her pleasure is in giving her force, not in withholding it. But if you keep your mind filled with thoughts of this kind, either about X or Y or Z or others, and or your needs and grievances, you are shutting up yourself in that, and there is no room for the higher consciousness and its force to come in. These are the divine words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo.